Breaking news, and it could be good news for England fans, potentially. The England game against Mexico could be moved from its 1 a.m. kick-off time on Monday morning because of the threat of thunderstorms, potentially moved earlier so that kick-off would be on Sunday evening. This is because of the threat of lightning strikes. So we know that the weather has already impacted some matches at the World Cup. When France beat Iraq 3-0 in Philadelphia, a thunderstorm caused a 2-hour delay. Mexico and Ecuador also had to wait an extra hour to start their match because of a thunderstorm in Mexico City. According to US rules, play must be stopped if a lightning strike is detected within 8 miles of a stadium. A match can only resume after 30 minutes has passed since the last lightning strike, and that countdown resets if more inclement weather arrives. So not temperatures causing the problem. In fact, it's only going to be in the low 20s, we understand, for that England game. Not the high temperature, but rather the threat of lightning strikes. So the breaking news: England's face-off with Mexico in the World Cup could be moved earlier, potentially to noon local time, which would be 7 p.m. on Sunday. Let's go to our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin. Nick, not that long ago, you were in a pub speaking to punters about the fact that England fans were going to have to wait until 1 a.m. on Monday morning to watch this clash with Mexico. But we are now hearing that potentially, and of course a lot depends on weather forecasts over the next 48 hours, it could be moved earlier. Well, what a roller coaster this is. I can't keep up, Jonathan, but, you know, it's all up in the air at the moment. But we have been talking a lot about this today. As you say, the original kick-off between England and Mexico was due to be 6 p.m. Mexico City time. That was going to be a kick-off of 1 a.m. in the early hours of Monday, and that got everybody talking because obviously it was so late, and what were we going to do? Were we going to stay up? Were we going to go to work the next day? Were children going to go to school? Then, after England progressed through to that stage, the government turned around and said, look, have a great time. We're going to lengthen the licensing hours so that pubs can stay open until 5 a.m. And everyone was like, well, this is brilliant. And then the police today said, well, hang on, this is all a bit short notice. And there was a kind of mini row between the body representing police forces and the UK. And the police said, look, we've only got a few days to sort this out. We might have to pull police officers from the community to try and police this in the early hours. And all the venues were gearing up to accept thousands of people in the middle of the night. And now a storm predicted to cross over the Azteca Stadium is putting all of that in doubt. And it now means that potentially that kick-off will start 7 p.m. UK time, which changes the whole complexion of this story. And now I suppose the big question now is what the government do if that turns out to be the case, because at the moment we've got an open door for pubs to stay open until 5 a.m. Will the Prime Minister have to come back and say, party's over, we're going to go back to the original licensing laws? So an absolute roller coaster of a story, and I'm not really quite sure whether I can keep track of it. No, it's a very good point. Just to reiterate the breaking news then, England's World Cup last 16 tie with Mexico could be moved from its current 1 a.m. UK time kick-off. That game was scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. local time, but because of storms, as we've been saying, it could now be moved earlier. And actually, for many fans, this is good news if it does happen, because watching a game at 7 p.m. on a Sunday evening is perfectly reasonable. I think many people were having quite a hard decision over the weekend whether to stay up and risk being exhausted on Monday morning. And of course, there's also been a bit of a debate about whether school kids should be allowed to go to school a bit later if they stayed up to watch the match. That's right. The England coach said, write them a note, let them off. And then Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, was forced to say, look, if they do watch the game in the middle of the night,
please try and make sure that they get up for school in the morning. So, you know, the whole idea of the timings of this game has caused quite the debate in the United Kingdom, from schools to pubs opening to safety to policing. You know, it's really been quite an interesting turn of events, which makes the change of the time of the match really quite significant. As you say, a 7 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday is far nicer generally all round. Although I did speak to a lot of people in London today, mostly Aussies, gearing up to watch their game against Egypt tonight. And people were saying they don't mind watching it in that time. They were just going to treat it like a normal game. But, you know, the practicalities are obvious. If you're going to roll in, having been to the match at until 5 a.m., then, you know, that is going to have a knock-on effect for work and school. And, you know, can people get trains back? And I think that's one of the reasons why the police were initially concerned at the sort of last-minute notice of the government's change to those licensing laws. But I think if it does change, and we are waiting for confirmation of that, if the kick-off time does change because of this suspected or predicted storm, then I think generally all round that will be a better situation. But the question is whether the government have to intervene and say, OK, we're now scrapping the idea of opening pubs until 5 a.m. and that means we've come full circle again to the beginning.
Yeah, and pubs have already probably organised extra staff, extra bouncers, extra people behind the bar. So that will all have to change. Interesting stuff. Nick, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by the football journalist Henry Winter. Thanks for speaking to us at such short notice, Henry. What do you make of this?
Well, there's always a storm with England. It's not normally a meteorological one, so I'm actually at the England training ground. We just had a wonderful chat with Marcus Rashford and Morgan Rogers, and the Mexican journalists who were there. They were obviously getting indications of this from back home, and it spread. As you say, you know, there's been no confirmation yet. But what was interesting, what the Mexicans were saying, because we were asking sort of Morgan Rogers and Marcus Rashford sort of nice, innocent questions about will the ball move at altitude, and then the Mexican journalist said afterwards, he said, "Don't worry about the altitude. It's going to be the pollution at noon, which it will be in Mexico City at the Azteca for the kickoff, if confirmed. That will be more of an issue. But look, England have their sports scientists. They have their preparation. They won't have seen necessarily an eventuality like this, although one of their games was slightly delayed by a storm in the warm-up matches in Florida. But, you know, this is England. England waited 60 years for to try and get closer to a trophy, and a few storms buffeting them on the way. Well, it's nothing they're not used to.
No, we just heard actually in the last few moments from our sports correspondent Rob Harris, who says what you've been saying, Henry. FIFA in ongoing discussions over the Mexico-England kick-off time to earlier on Sunday due to the risk of weather disruption, including flooding as well. Sky News understands FIFA is in ongoing discussions over moving the kick-off time. So, yeah, as you say, we'll wait for an update. And a lot can change in the weather as well over 48 hours. Psychologically, do you think this will have any impact on the squad? Because I suppose they'll know that if they're playing at 7 p.m. UK time, plenty more people will be in front of the telly.
I mean, these are elite athletes. They are cut off. Obviously, they'll have a look on social media. They've got their families. They'll be tuning into to you guys. But, you know, this is the pinnacle for them. They're going to the Azteca. I mean, even Morgan Rogers, when we were talking to him earlier, he's very aware of the hand of God in '86 and the goal of the century, the Maradona. So, yes, they are aware of it, but they should be excited by the possibility of playing there. I mean, there's always this element with England. You know, we have these sort of psychological pressure points, whether it's penalties, whether it's dentist chairs, whether it's the pressure of the nation. I mean, you see the celebrations here. They know that they know the country is watching them, and for the best players, as we've seen with Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham, it's an absolute inspiration. The shirt, because of the work that Gareth Southgate has done, he's changed the culture, changed the mood, and obviously Thomas Tuchel is reaping the benefits of that. They are, maybe there's a little bit of pressure, but they're focused. I mean, having spent time with them over the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks, they know. Look, you talk to someone like Declan Rice, he knows that this could be the year of his life with Arsenal and with England, and they don't want to let that slip. They will absolutely respect the Mexican opposition. They'll respect the fact that it's not going to feel like a home game, which all the other games out here have been. They've been like your scenes here at the stadium so far in the States. It's a Mexican home game, and they will take it. But they'll look around the dressing room and they'll look at the players they've got, and they should have a little bit of belief.
Yeah, and of course, plenty of those players are very used to playing in stormy conditions. Less time for altitude training, though. Is that going to be an issue, do you think? I mean, it's only a few hours. Is that negligible?
Well, I mean, some sports scientists might say it actually helps because actually, if you come in a shorter period, they sort of say either come in sort of 2-3 weeks away or come in on the day. Now, because of FIFA protocol, you've got to come in 2 days in advance, so they couldn't do that. But yeah, absolutely, it's an issue. I mean, Sir Alf Ramsey took England to Mexico on a sort of tour before the World Cup the following year. They played at the Azteca, 0-0, 105,000 people, and Sir Bobby Charlton came off the pitch absolutely exhausted, as the others did, because of the altitude. And the first thing that Ramsey said to the FA is, look, if we're coming back here next year to play in the World Cup finals in this heat, plus altitude as well, we need to come a month in advance. England haven't got that. So, but look, these are supreme athletes, and this will be as much in the head as actually in the lungs. But boy, do they need a good, strong start, quite partly to quieten the locals, who are fantastically passionate about their team.
Yeah, as we know. And, I mean, this isn't the first time in this tournament that the weather has disrupted games, is it? I think the France-Iraq game and one other that was disrupted as well, am I right? Mexico versus Ecuador?
Yeah, certainly the France game, and that was almost celebrated in the second half when they did actually get playing again, because they didn't have the hydration break. So I think fans probably quite enjoyed that. Yeah, look, it's an issue, but the quality of the pitches out here is phenomenal, and they drain incredibly quickly. They're used to this. So when you mentioned the issue of flooding, that will be less of an issue. If anything, that will be more an issue for the fans, for the egress to the stadium. So look, they are prepared for these things. They take it with a slight shrug. I mean, just being here in Kansas City, my phone goes off if there's a tornado warning, which we've had 2 or 3 times out here. So look, they're prepared for it, and I think psychologically, England have got a sports psychologist out with them, who I'm sure will be talking to the players, as Tuchel will be. I can't imagine Tuchel is too pleased, whether he thinks it's, the host's dirty tricks or whatever. I'm sure some of the headlines will reflect that. But he's just got to focus on, well, finding a right back and getting his team right.
Are the rules particularly strict or different in the United States than elsewhere when it comes to this sort of thing? They seem to be pretty stringent in terms of, the lightning has to be a certain distance away from the stadium or the game gets postponed. Is that a FIFA thing, or is it a US thing, a Mexico thing? What are the rules?
I mean, it's very much a US and Mexico thing, because they're used to these sudden storms coming in, and if you've got 70,000 people in a huge stadium open to the elements, then you cannot go ahead. We got caught in one the other day. I was watching the Dutch, and we had to sort of take shelter in the tunnel, and they were very strict. You couldn't move sort of 30 yards either way, and you had to stay away from certain live wires. But look, they've got the protocol in place. They're used to weather extremes. This is not a wheelie bin being blown over in Haywards Heath High Street and the whole country coming to a standstill. They are very much used to tornadoes and dealing with big weather here. So obviously this is in Mexico City, but they're used to it as well. But look, there'll be a lot of focus on the altitude, but I think it's more an issue of the pollen at high noon, as I'm sure it's going to be dubbed for the kickoff.
Oh, goodness, yeah, there's something else to worry about. And what is the mood in the camp overall, especially following that last sort of nerve-wracking game?
Well, I think the mood on the first half would have been incredibly disappointed, because they were appalling in the first half. The defence, which has been an issue for most of the tournament, is a concern, absolutely. And Raul Jimenez and the Mexican strikers will be looking at that and thinking, oh, I can do some damage here. But then those players, when they gather at half-time or in these sort of much-hated hydration breaks, they'll look around, they'll look at Bellingham, Champions League winner, Real Madrid player. They'll look at Harry Kane, look at the way he's responded to the challenge of Messi, Mbappe and Haaland and all these great players out here. And he's got, 84 goals for his country in 118 appearances. I mean, Kane is one of these leaders who looks at and said, this is not going to happen on my watch, not while I'm captain, and will drag them through. I think it's a very difficult tournament for England because of the length. Players are coming off a long, hard season. Certainly those playing in the Premier League. And by the way, it's no surprise that two of England's best players out here, those who actually play abroad, Bellingham, Spain, Kane, Germany, with a winter break, that gives them a little bit of a breather in the season. But look, they've got good players. Look at Declan Rice, the form he's in. The real disappointment has actually been, well, obviously fullback, but out wide, the wingers haven't quite clicked. Whether Bukayo Saka's not fully 100%, Gordon looks like he's coming back into form, which is good. But so look, England have got the players. They just can't let all the sort of psychological element get to them.
OK. Henry, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. We'll let you get back to looking at the weather forecast. But for the moment, thank you.
Pleasure.
Let's speak to Molly Stevens from Sky Sports News. Hi again, Molly. The breaking news then, FIFA in ongoing discussions over the kick-off time. What's the latest you're hearing?
The latest is that it's absolutely up in the air right now, to be honest with you. You know, these discussions are very much ongoing. It is a genuine possibility that the game could be moved to 7 o'clock BST, but that is a huge difference when it comes to how it did look and what it looks like now. You know, there's so many factors that this could change, not least the fact that England were actually planning to head to Mexico City after their news conference this afternoon, which is in Kansas City. So this would really affect the preparations for England going forward, for their fans, of course. There's all sorts of questions being asked right now, but we know that the discussions are ongoing, but there's still not a decision that's been made as yet.
Yeah, and, you know, all eyes will be on the weather forecast. Things can change very quickly, but clearly there are protocols in place, and the safety of the players, of the spectators, is at the front of everyone's mind.
Of course, that's absolutely paramount, and we're talking about extreme weather conditions here. We're talking about potential storms and therefore potential flooding. You know, to lessen the disruption is absolutely fundamental for the organisers. They've not had to come up against something quite like this as yet, this World Cup. We knew that the weather could have been an issue during the World Cup, but this would have been the biggest hitter. And as I mentioned, not just a hitter for fans who, let's be honest, will have been looking forward to planning their fights and making sure they had all their hotel accommodation, etc., all sewn up ready for the original kick-off time. Will they be able to get there in time? Will there be cost implications for them? Not least then the players and their preparation, how much this might affect their preparation on the field as well as off the field. Obviously, the Mexican players are in Mexico City already, given that they're playing at their home stadium of the Azteca. So it's really interesting right now. We know that the kick-off time has not been confirmed. The change to that kick-off time has not been confirmed. These discussions are ongoing, but the implications could potentially be huge. You know, another thing that's been spoken about a lot has been the altitude and the temperature in Mexico City. How might that change when a game is brought forward 6 hours earlier than it was originally set to be played? Might that affect the hydration breaks? Might that affect their altitude training, etc.? There's a lot to be catered for here in next to no time, really, when we're talking, Friday evening now, and we're talking about 48 hours time. Massive implications for the entire team. But as you rightly say, you know, safety is paramount, and that is exactly what FIFA are looking at right now, is just how safe that could be by bringing it forward. But as we know, the weather changes all of the time. They might predict those storms in 48 hours, but they might change themselves. So we'll have to wait and see. But needless to say, we'll bring you the very latest as soon as we have it across Sky.
Yeah, brilliant. FIFA, as you say, in ongoing discussions over that kick-off time. We'll come back to you, Molly, if there is an update. For now, thank you very much. Let's bring in Michael Kill, the Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association. Good to have you on the programme, and good to get your thoughts on this breaking news, the potential for this game being brought forward. There's been this huge debate, hasn't there, over the last 24 hours about whether or not pubs can stay open into the early hours of Monday morning. It all might now become irrelevant.
Very much so. I mean, it seems like this game is the gift that keeps on giving. Somewhat, I mean, we're obviously concerned because there's a lot of planning and logistics going into covering a game in the early hours of the morning. The shift to 7 o'clock, I think, is without doubt is going to be beneficial, but there is a lot of communication, a lot of organisation that goes around this. So we're hoping the decision comes quite quickly so that businesses can prepare. And as you've heard, the police are also trying to prepare. So this shift is going to have a considerable impact on the way that they resource also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to work out whether pubs will be pleased or not by this news, because on one hand, you know, to be open for longer means people can drink and eat for longer, but bringing it forward to 7 p.m, I guess, would mean that more people are going to go to the pub at a reasonable time of the evening.
Without a doubt. I mean, look, there's going to be different views on this situation. I mean, the challenge that we have at the moment is, a lot of people felt that they were going to have an elongated evening. And that sounds great. And for many people who traditionally operate on a Sunday, that's fantastic. So there will be people out there that will be sort of frustrated by the indecision here. But the reality is bringing people together, getting that sort of community feel again, whether it's 7 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. The imminent decision is key at the moment, both from a policing perspective and an operator perspective, just so that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about the need for planning and the need for an earlier decision, because that's been the criticism of this move by the government, hasn't it? That it was very last minute and that didn't give pubs time to plan, but also it didn't give the police time to plan.
No, but I mean, one thing I would say is a lot of the pubs that are prepared, and speaking to many of the large law firms out there, they have spoken to us and they've given advice to go for a temporary event notices anyway because of the game and that extension. So many people would have already facilitated a longer license. The challenge we have now, as you can appreciate with the extension being brought in from government, is many of those people who haven't got that license may well take the chance, although limited, we believe. So this shift to 7 o'clock is a complete shift in dynamic. So we've got to really think about what we're doing. If that happens, what we're going to do resource-wise, and the whole dynamic of the evening will change. So it will be frustrating for many of the businesses out there that have already prepared.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about these temporary event notices because ultimately, maybe that was sufficient as it was. We now have this blanket licence for any pub to stay open until 5 in the morning, but any publican could have applied for one of these temporary event notices, and in a way, they then discuss with their local licensing authority, with the local police. They get a case-by-case decision, which means that everyone is happy. Do you think the government needed to step in and make this move?
I think in some cases, without a doubt, where there were local authorities that were quite challenging in terms of getting these temporary events notices pushed through. So without a doubt, I think there are some out there that feel that it's been a reprieve and has been a good decision, and many out there who missed the deadlines for a temporary event notice, bearing in mind that the results of the last match would have predetermined whether this match was something that was relevant for England fans, was quite key, and that timeline between the two would have been challenging. So I think the reality is there's lots of different perspectives. The majority of people, good operators, have applied for a TEN and just covered their bases to ensure that they have the ability to do it. But without doubt, the perspective of the fact is that TENs could have been in place and could have remedied this either way. But like I say, I think the Prime Minister's decision was a low-risk decision, given the fact that most people had applied for TENs anyway.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. Do you accept the police's concerns about drinking into the early hours, especially when it's hot, when the football is on, or do you think that's unfounded?
I think when we look at it pragmatically, I think we've got to consider what it looks like in terms of the volume of business and the amount of people who are going to stay out late. There are certain styles of business that don't suit football. Rural venues, pubs, etc., possibly won't put the football on. So there is a big majority of people who won't take this up. Now, in terms of the policing, we've spoke to the police, spoke to the Met particularly, and talked to them about where we feel or what it looks like in terms of the increased use of that extension of licence. So for us, we feel it's going to be a moderate increase. I think people are going to be quite considered given neighbours and early hours of the morning and noise. But we also got to consider if we don't put it on, people are going to have gatherings in houses and things like that within that community. So it's going to be a bit of a community event, whether it's in the pub and it's controlled, secure, secure, safe with security and management, or whether it's something that happens in a multitude of houses around a community. So I think for many people, they'd prefer it to be in an environment which is safe, is considered, has those regulatory controls in place.
Yeah, and we know the pub industry, the late night industry has had its real struggles over recent years. How successful has this World Cup been in generating more income? Have you found that profits are up, that punters are enjoying watching the game in the pub?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's just rekindled that sort of community spirit. I think these tournaments do so much for reminding people how important pubs and venues are within their communities. So for us, it's without a doubt, it's generated revenue, generated points over the bar. But I think the big thing is we're just reminding people that these pubs are really important. And so many people have come out supported. They've really remembered what it's like, this creation of an atmosphere that everyone can sort of join into. So, the big message that we've got coming out for it is go out, support your local business and venue. Even when we look at the bounce off the back of the tournament, whether we get through on Sunday or not, and I'm hoping we will. I'm predicting 2-0, so to England, by the way. And hopefully this bounce will mean that more people will come out and just get to these venues and spaces and support them as much as possible in this challenging period.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever time they play, let's hope they win and the party can continue. Michael Kill, Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association and Captain America. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Hello there, a very good evening. For the last few days, the late night timing of England's World Cup match against Mexico has been causing problems for pubs, politicians, police and parents. But now it seems it could be moved to an earlier time. FIFA are in discussions about bringing forward the kick-off, which is currently scheduled for 1 a.m. on Monday morning because of concerns about the weather. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris joins us from Mexico City. Rob, how's the weather looking?
Well, the concern is about the weather on Sunday. I've just flown into Mexico City from Atlanta following the route of many of the England fans as their World Cup journey continues. But now there is some uncertainty for England because Sky News understands that FIFA is in discussions about moving the kickoff time for England's match against Mexico here in Mexico City on Sunday. It was due to be on Sunday night at 7 p.m. local time, but now the new time that's been mooted is 12 noon. Now, it's a concern about potential thunderstorms, which could cause flooding here in Mexico City, and that could potentially lead to delays in the game. So FIFA is taking this preemptive action to look at moving the match to earlier in the day. Now, the forecasts do show some concerns about potential thunderstorms in the afternoon, and that could impact things, particularly if the last 16 clash was to go into extra time and then penalties. And there will be concerns given the fact Mexico's game in the last 32 was delayed by an hour, the kickoff, due to thunderstorms here in Mexico City. And that has a knock-on effect. It means the game finishes much later. It poses crowd control issues for police as well, particularly as we saw the other day, huge numbers, thousands packing into the streets of Mexico City to celebrate their win. In fact, that there were deaths from crushing that resulted from such huge numbers in the streets. So it's a very important crowd management situation the police need to prepare for. And particularly if there's thunderstorms that leads to flooding, it could be a particularly challenging situation. I was here 3 weeks ago for Mexico's opening match against South Africa, and that was also a lunchtime kickoff. And it was quite chaotic around the stadium in terms of dealing with the crowds and crowds getting away. And that was for a game finishing in the afternoon. So an evening kickoff poses particular issues, particularly when there's the potential for thunderstorms and flooding. Now, I understand the FA has no firm new kickoff time. They're still in talks with FIFA about what does happen. But FIFA can move kickoff times. We saw it last summer in the Club World Cup in the United States. That's 6 matches had significant weather disruptions. They'd already kicked off. There were delays. Some starts were delayed. So this is a very different move in FIFA looking at it 2 days out to try to address the situation. But it will cause some problems for fans if the kickoff is moved to 12 noon. There could well be fans who plan to fly in during the day to make it in time for a 7 p.m. local time kickoff and now could miss the match or are trying to now rearrange their flights. Now, there is a knock-on effect very much back in England because all the last few days have been dominated by talk about pubs opening late, staying open into the early hours, because it would have been a 1 a.m. local time kickoff back in England, the 7 p.m. Kickoff in Mexico City. So I believe that would be 2 a.m. In England, if I'm getting my time zones right. So this will completely change the dynamic. Now, if it is a 12 noon kickoff in Mexico, it will be 7 p.m. in the UK, this kickoff time. So all this talk about pubs needing to stay open, the challenge for police back in England in particular, having to deal with all the issues of crowds into the early hours of the morning and being able to staff up themselves as police forces, well, that goes completely out the window. The legislation that they've had to rush through as a government will no longer be needed unless there are pubs that still want to enact it and say they'll stay open right the way through into the early hours of the morning. So a significantly more favourable kickoff time it would be back in England for fans watching there. But FIFA currently in talks about whether or not to move the kickoff time for England's last 16 match with Mexico in the Azteca Stadium to early in the day, potentially to 12 noon, to mitigate against the potential for storms and flooding in Mexico City, impacting things around the stadium, and also whether or not the match can even be played and whether there'd be a very long delay, which would of course be necessary because it's ultimately all about the safety of the players and indeed the fans. But those talks, we understand, are still ongoing. It would have a knock-on effect as well for the other match on the day as well, because FIFA won't want an overlapping of those fixtures. But England are due to fly here into Mexico City later on today from their base in Kansas City. They are getting here earlier than usual due to a change in FIFA requirements to be here 2 days out from the match. England prepared for quite a historic match in terms of playing one of the great stadiums in the world, something they haven't done since 1986 when they played in the Azteca Stadium against Argentina and lost to Diego Maradona's side with the famous Hand of God match back then. But still be waiting for a final word from FIFA what happens to this match. Something else I've learned that impacts this game. Sky News can reveal that FIFA actually warned teams ahead of this World Cup about the potential for players to be potentially contaminated by meat here in Mexico, which could lead to failing doping tests. So that's something of particular concern as well here as England prepare to land, about being cautious about what meat they eat and ensuring it's not contaminated with clenbuterol, which is used in cattle to reduce fat and maintain muscle mass. So that's another thing that England are having to consider to ensure their players don't inadvertently fail doping tests and having to argue the case that they unwittingly and unintentionally actually had the infected meat. So many challenges here that impacting Mexico City and the World Cup. Part of the challenges you can get at a World Cup, but we're waiting to hear final word as FIFA are in talks about whether or not to move the Mexico-England match to an earlier kickoff to 12 noon on Sunday.
OK, Rob, for the moment, thank you. We'll come back to you if there is any update. Let's speak to Molly Stevens from Sky Sports News. Molly, still waiting then for a definitive answer. How is this potentially going to affect the squad when it comes to their training and I guess their mental preparation as well?
Absolutely, Jonathan. I mean, you know, naturally it has an impact when you're expected to fly, you know, far later and arrive for a game that's due to take place in the evening. Now, much of the build-up to this match has been dominated by the altitude and how much an altitude can affect a player. Now, whether it be hydration, dehydration, fatigue, you know, there are a number of different elements, heavy breathing, one of them, that can affect a football player when playing at such a high altitude. Now, that's been the domination. And with that, remember that the kickoff time was meant to be in the evening, as it stands, still is in the evening. If it were to move to 7 p.m. BST, that would be midday in Mexico. So we're talking about temperatures that are likely to rise. The whole point that it was initially scheduled to be in the evening was so temperatures were around the 20 degrees Celsius mark. Now, if it were to move to midday, you're talking more about 26 degrees Celsius. So all of a sudden, the priorities of Thomas Tuchel, his staff behind the scenes and the players completely change because how they directly prepare for the altitude changes, because they're talking about now the heat in conjunction. Now, I do know that Sky Sports News has spoken with Morgan Rogers, one of the players out in Kansas City, and I have this quote from him directly. He has said this is just another obstacle to overcome. They will be ready regardless of the time. The earlier the better he says they want the decision because you want to play. There's enough thinking about what is going to happen and the build-up, but you just want to play the game. He goes on to say getting the adrenaline out there will help us and get us going and playing. We're looking forward to it, whatever the time is. He says, I'm not concerned about the change of time, but won't be happy if it wakes me up. I'll be honest. We'll deal with it as best as possible. It's just another obstacle to get over. We also know that Marcus Rashford, the forward, has also been speaking to the media this afternoon, their time, and has told media that, again, he is just wanting to get the game to go ahead. Their players will be ready regardless of the circumstances. Another update to bring you is that Sky Sports News understands that the Mexican FA have not yet been informed of a change of time. So it's really important to note that both the Mexican FA and the Football Association, the English Football Association, albeit are having these talks with FIFA, it is only FIFA that can make this decision. So as much as their talks can be ongoing and they can put aside their feelings, FIFA, at their sole discretion, are the only ones that can make this change. Now, given the fact we're talking less than 48 hours for this potential new kick-off time to go ahead, you'd expect that this decision will be made pretty soon, because as Rob mentioned, this doesn't just affect the players, this also affects fans and their timings to come in and out of Mexico City. That could have a huge consequence for them. Of course, we've already talked about the consequences for people back here in the UK with what's been going on with keeping pubs open and letting children watch whether or not they're in school the following morning or not. But the crux of this is, if there are severe storms that could cause flooding, you know, health and safety of fans, of players is absolutely paramount. So FIFA will make the decision that they feel is right, and I'd expect that decision will come pretty soon.
Yeah, we know a couple of other games in the tournament have been disrupted by poor weather. Health and safety, of course, has to come first. Molly, thank you very much for that update. Let's bring in our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin. Nick, you've got a feel for publicans, haven't you? They've been scrambling to find staff and sort out everything needed for a 5 a.m. closing time on Monday morning after the government made that last-minute decision that they were allowed to open for longer. Now, that might all be for nothing if this game is going to take place at a much more reasonable time, I suppose, of 7 p.m. here in the UK.
Yeah, it's certainly a funny old story, this, and one with quite, for me, really an unexpected political slant to it. I mean, I spent much of today talking to fans and publicans all about this big overnight game that we've all been talking about for the last day and a half. The prospect of being in the pub at 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. The very fact that the government said, look, we're going to have this extension to the licensing laws so everybody can watch the match. And big questions have we just heard about who will do it, what will we do about work on Monday morning, will children stay up and get to school? The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, wading in, suggesting that children could watch the match but should be in school in the morning. And then the National Police Chiefs Council today starting quite a bit of a row, saying that the government had kind of sprung this on them, that they should have had more notice to get staffing, to get police officers in place, to try and make sure that this passed off safely. Only now to be talking about a potential storm coming through in Mexico City over the stadium that might all change the parameters once again, effectively meaning that instead of a 1 a.m. start, we might be looking at a 7 p.m. start on Sunday, which does, to be frank, make things a lot easier. And one of the people we've been speaking to is Michael Kill from the Nighttime Industry Association, and this is what his take was about the whole affair.
I mean, it seems like this game is the gift that keeps on giving. Somewhat, I mean, we're obviously concerned because there's a lot of planning and logistics going into covering a game in the early hours of the morning. The shift to 7 o'clock, I think, is without doubt is going to be beneficial, but there is a lot of communication, a lot of organisation that goes around this. So we're hoping the decision comes quite quickly so that businesses can prepare. And as you've heard, the police are also trying to prepare. So this shift is going to have a considerable impact on the way that they resource also.
Now, as we've just been hearing, we don't have absolute confirmation that the change of the game's kick-off changes is actually happening. But you have to think about what the government will do next, because at the moment there is an open door for pubs to stay open until 5 a.m. on Monday morning. Does the government now pull back that legislation, cancel that, and put things back to normal, or does it just allow to carry on? A lot of these questions we don't know the answer to, but over the last couple of days we've gone from sort of highs and lows of all these changes and stories about being up in the middle of the night to now the prospect of the game being arguably at a much better time all round. Better for the landlords, better for people, better for the police, and better for the government.
Yeah, I think a lot of people may well be relieved if they don't have to make that decision about whether to go to bed or go to the boozer in the early hours of the morning. Nick, thank you very much indeed. We'll keep you across updates, of course, and if we get a definitive answer, we'll bring it straight to you here on Sky News.